Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 244.
And this week, it's Daisy's turn. Daisy, what do you have?
Well, Terry, I am back with a bite-sized episode from Rangan Chatterjee's podcast, Feel Better, Live More. I have a feeling I did actually listen to the original episode, and I might even have the book, but it was so long ago that I have forgotten most of it. But the title grabbed my attention, How to Design Your Perfect Life, with Dr Tara Swart. And I thought, well, that probably, picks up on a few things we've been talking about in the last handful of episodes. The full episode is way back in like double figures. It's number 50 something. So didn't even look to see how many years ago that was. How to Open Your Mind and Change Your Life, with, of course, Dr. Tara Swart. And Dr. Tara Swart is a neuroscientist, executive coach, and author of the book, The Source. I'll have a look when I finish recording with you to see. It might even be in my Audible library somewhere. We shall see. Anyway, in this bite-sized episode, obviously they were talking about other things in the full episode, but in this one, they were concentrating on vision boards and the importance of visual images. And they were saying that visual images track to parts of your brain that resonate deeper down than things like written down lists. And an ideal vision board, she says her current vision board is a Pinterest board, which she says is not ideal because an ideal vision board is a collage that you make by hand. So it ticks the images are better box, but it's also very tactile because you've put it together yourself. So you have more of a connection with it. And you do this by collecting images that represent things you want for yourself over the coming year. Hence why it sort of ties into what we were talking about, New Year's resolutions, New Year, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes you see images that are not necessarily things that you're looking out that you've thought about as wanting for yourself, but you might just be drawn to the image for some reason. She says, try not to use words or numbers, but you can do so if there are some that have a particular meaning to you and are particularly tied to something that you want to achieve this year. And she says also think about the overall look and feel of the board, and this should tally with how you want your life to be. So, don't make it messy and cluttered if you're looking to move towards a more uncluttered and simple life, for example. Rangan asks her, how do they help? Is it like an awareness by visualizing things? Is your brain then more aware and on the lookout for things that you want and that are important to you? And she says with things like journaling and affirmation, these are words, obviously. Vision boards add a different level because they're composed of images. And this works through two mechanisms in the brain: selective attention or filtering and something called value tagging. We're bombarded by lots of information all the time via different senses, and our brains have to filter most of this out simply because there's just too much of it. So we have a natural mechanism for understanding what's really important to us, and anything not relevant gets filtered out, or we just be, brain overload. And by creating a vision board, you're priming your brain and telling it what's important to you, so it will be more likely to notice these things in your day-to-day life. And value tagging, this is what the brain decides to keep front of your mind, and it then tags in order of importance. Things like your personal identity, work identity, feeling of belonging in society, also things that you need to be successful. So if you repeatedly look at these images on your vision board, they'll be higher up in your value tagging system. And she mentions something called the Tetris effect. We've mentioned this with playing jigsaws online and me colouring in that they sort of appear in your dreams. But she was saying the Tetris effect was when people stayed up really late playing it. And then those images continue to play out behind your eyes and into your dreams. So, but it's the same principle. So if you keep your vision board near your bed, and then you look at it when you're in the impressionable state that you're in before sleep and on waking. And by doing that, you'll be more likely to act on triggers as they present themselves. So they dig in a little bit to this period just before you go to bed. Rangan talks about this and how it's really worth thinking about what images you're looking at during this time. What are you exposing your brain to just before you go to sleep when you're in this really, your brain is in this really impressionable state? Are you exposing yourself repeatedly to bad news? Doing this, especially with images, can be traumatic, even though you haven't experienced the events directly. And Dr. Swart cites the example of 9/11, and she said that there were people who sort of overexposed themselves to these images, actually suffered from PTSD, even though they hadn't been there directly experiencing it themselves. So especially in this pre-bedtime state, it's worth being mindful about what you're priming your body to think about subconsciously.
I think that's so important, Daisy. And it's funny when you bring it up because I think about it a lot now, especially that we're often looking at iPads or phones or whatever, social media, news feeds, how much negative stuff are we exposing ourselves to? How much like really active stuff are we exposing ourselves to at that impressionable stage? But it's really interesting because you just made me think about it as you said it. So when I was in my master's program, one of my professors talked about the importance of when people are struggling with nightmares and difficulty, not kind of playing out these violent scenes or things in their dreams, what she would encourage them to do is before they would go to sleep, think about positive things, think about calming things. Because what we think about right before we go to sleep often gets incorporated into our sleep. And so if you're thinking about the fight you had with your spouse, if you're thinking about some kind of trauma, or you're thinking about that murder podcast you just listened to, Terry, that can very easily then get incorporated. So mindfully choose where you put your brain as you go to that phase so that that's what gets incorporated.
Yeah, and it's not to say you can't ever look at those things, that you can only ever look at positive images. It's just, I thought it was interesting to just really consider, and I guess make part of your sleep routine. All these sleep experts who talk about your sleep routine, they talk about the importance of that, whatever it is, hour or so before you're going to bed, the sort of wind down period. And so just to be mindful of what you're putting into that. And I think that's one of the reasons, not that I tend to just sort of scroll a bit on social media during the day. It's not really the kind of thing that I look at last thing at night or first thing in the morning, actually. But we were talking about this, I think, in the last episode, about that maybe I kind of, in some ways, have over-curated my newsfeed. But people talk about the evil algorithm of Facebook. But really, the algorithm just shows you more of what you want. So if you click on things like cute puppy videos and, mine changes depending what I'm interested in. I've got quite, there are a few dog things, obviously, but I've got some interesting sort of ceramic videos and art videos, and I clicked on some links because my niece is into crochet, so I've got all this crochet stuff coming up, and just things like that. So it will give you more of what you want, so you can prime it. And interestingly, one of the feeds that I follow is a local sort of newspaper site, local news site, Hastings Observer, I think it's called. And they have, I don't know whether they've been taken over by some kind of national thing, or they've just, I don't know, the marketing department has told them they need more clicks or something. But they have started putting clickbaity articles that are nothing, they're not local stories at all. They're all noticeably horrible stories. So someone's died in a car crash. Someone has died this horrible way or that horrible way, or someone's been beaten up, or something nasty has happened in one way, shape, or form. And well, I don't click on them anymore. I've clicked on them a couple of times because I thought, gosh, there's a lot of horrible things happening locally, and find out, no, it's in Birmingham, or it's in Wales, or it's in Scotland, or it's nowhere near where I am. It's not local news at all. I was following a local news site because I wanted to see what the local news was. And more, they're just putting these clickbaity things on. But the clickbait stuff is horrible stuff. So I've unfollowed it. Anyway, rant over. But yeah, it shows that clickbait is usually negatively skewed because we're primed to want to sort of grab onto the negative. So that, in and of itself tells you something. So back to what we were talking about, and Rangan asked Dr. Swart, asked her why images are so powerful. And she says that vision is a primary sense for most people. And we're bombarded with images that we don't necessarily curate. The visual tracks more strongly to the subconscious than when you read something, which takes a different path around your brain. It gets picked up by things like logic, emotion, intuition. Images, she says, bypass logic and go straight to our core, so tend to resonate a lot more strongly with us. So it is important to try and keep these images positive, especially as we're primed to put more emphasis on the negative. And Rangan throws in, is that why Instagram has been so successful? Because it's image based, but also probably why it can be so toxic on the reverse. As she says, images can be so impactful in both positive and negative ways. Issues with things like comparison, discontentment, resentment, these are magnified so much more with imagery than writing. So it's a powerful, powerful thing. So, if there's something you are scrolling through, especially images, it probably is quite important to curate things that I suppose you're mindlessly scrolling. So that was one of the reasons why, Facebook is my age, but Facebook is my primary platform. And I didn't want to be caught unawares as I was scrolling. I didn't want to be hit with something that I hadn't chosen to watch or look at. Because yes, images do hit me quite strongly. So I don't want to be scrolling down and see, a nasty image, get caught unawares by that. I would rather, when I am doing some research into something that might have some negative association with it, I want to be doing that consciously and researching things, but be primed to be, to sort of prepare myself for those things. I don't just want it to come out of nowhere. And going back to the vision board, Dr. Swart says that she focuses on things she can make possible. And she likes to actually call them action boards rather than vision boards.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the note I put to myself here was, this ties nicely back into what you were saying about magical thinking in the New Year's resolutions episode. She says, don't just make a collage and sit back and wait for all the magic to start happening. You need to be doing things every day to try and make your dreams come true. So what is actionable? What is possible? It's not a magical thinking vision board. And talking about social media, she was saying that spending too much time on social media could be taking you away from doing the things that you can do to make your life the life you really want, rather than spending so much time looking at other people's lives. And she apparently, in her book, she takes some of these ideas that can be maybe seen as being a bit woo-woo and have been misrepresented, things like the law of attraction. We've talked about this before. But she takes some of these ideas, and they're obviously vision board being one of the examples, but gives them some scientific grounding, makes them more realistic and something that is actionable. And Rangan talks to her about that. He says that one of her core concepts seems to be, how do we create the life that we want rather than just letting life happen to us? And she says, yeah, would you rather be in the driver's seat or the passenger seat? It's really easy just to go on autopilot. They talk a little bit about how many of us use fear to make decisions. And this is a natural default. And it takes quite a bit of effort to override this. It is actually a survival advantage. So we're primed that way for a reason. Negative emotions have a more powerful effect on our brain than positive ones. But she says, once you know this and you've raised it into your awareness, you can take steps to say, and this is apparently is a phrase that she uses a lot in her book, I choose to make my decisions from abundance. And she says, choose to make your decisions based on abundance and growth rather than avoiding something negative. So more of a sort of fear-based motivation. And they talked about, and again, this is sort of tying back into things that we've been talking about recently, meeting new people, having new experiences, makes your brain more open and flexible. And once you start getting some positive benefits from trying new things, then if something bad does happen, you will feel a bit more able to deal with a change because you've primed your brain to deal with changes and shown it that you can handle it. Rangan sort of wraps it up with a couple of things. He wraps it up by saying that we're programmed to look at the negative. So we really do need a strategy if we want to get the most out of life. And to do some of these things like gratitude journaling, or these vision boards, all these kind of things to add it to your daily practice. But the important thing is that we need to be aware that we need to put some strategies in place. And he asks her, what has she done? What does she do in her life? But she tries to do all the right things with things like sleep and diet and journaling, meditation, all the things I think that she talks about. But she doesn't get too stressed if she can't do one of them for a reason one day. And she maintains that it's better to change 10 things by 1% than one thing by 10%. And she advises on work on micro tweaks rather than big sweeping life changes. So obviously that's just a bite size taken from a longer episode, but I thought it tied in quite nicely to things that we've been talking about recently. And I quite liked what she was saying about vision boards or action boards.
I love that, of course, the action board versus just thinking of a vision board, because I think sometimes folks have a difficult time translating this vision of where I want to be and how I'm going to get there. And maybe it even means that your action board changes more frequently than your vision board. Your vision board is the overarching vision of where you see yourself going. And your action board is the month, the weeks, the whatever length of time, but how you're going to get there. And I also was thinking as you were talking, Daisy, I hate to admit this, I've grown a lot. Going back to last week's episode, I've grown a lot in the last 10 years, maybe. I used to poo-poo vision boards when I was a therapist. They were really popular. I don't know, people learned about it on Oprah or something, and they all talked about doing it. And I just had to catch myself not to roll my eyes when they would say it. But I did a vision board type of activity with a client, and I had brought in magazines and things, and we were talking and just created one together. And I created one while she was creating hers, and we were talking about it. I still can picture what's on there. And this was probably 8 or so years ago, at least. And so now that I'm trying to be more open to these things and feel like I've gone maybe into the woo-woo and certain things, I really think about the power of it. There's a ton of things that I thought I would do, planned, decided 8 years ago that I have no recollection of. But I can still see things on that vision board that I created. So again, just emphasizing the power of using this other mechanism besides just journaling or just thinking about it or reflecting. So it really is more powerful than I had originally given it credit for being.
Yeah, so I'm interested. Why did you poo-poo it? Was it the sort of difference that she talked about and how, some of the things have been misrepresented, like law of attraction and things like that? Did you poo-poo it because it went too far into the whole sort of magical thinking rather than actionable thinking sphere?
I think at that time just didn't have much belief in the power of all of these things that we've been talking about and other people talk about, that, having a vision matters, having intention matters. I didn't know anything or believe anything in manifestation. I think I was more, let's go back to last week. I think I was not even just skeptical. I think I was sometimes sitting in the cynical category of life. So like I said, as I'm reflecting on it based on this conversation, going back to last week, I think I have changed a lot in what things I value, what things I think matter and help us. And maybe part of that is just gaining more experience. In my work at the fasting method, obviously I worked with clients for many years as a therapist, but that looks a certain way and you get into certain ruts with that thinking. And this has really helped me to kind of get out of some of those ruts and see more of what is possible and the power of thought and intention and movement. I didn't know anything about the real benefits of movement, even in our mental health and things. So I think there's been a lot of growth for me. And obviously this episode isn't about me, but that idea that something that to me just seemed woo-woo, oh, they're just trying to sell these books or they're trying to sell materials so people will make vision boards. I really see the value in these things now. And so I love hearing you talk about someone using them so proactively and even evolving what a vision board looks like. When they first came out, it felt like scrapbooking to me. Let's all do a vision board.
Yeah.
But now I can really see the true nature of it.
Yeah, I remember it being sort of hijacked, by people. Yeah, it was total sort of magical thinking. Your vision board had a picture of a Porsche and fancy holidays, and it was just, it was all about stuff, and yeah, it was completely different. I really liked what she was saying, and like I say, I'm going to see if I've actually got her book or might listen to it. If not, I like the fact that she's taken some of these things that have been a little bit hijacked and ended up with this woo-woo tag and been dismissed and been put in the cynicism bucket. She's putting them in the let's be skeptical, open, and think about them a bit more bucket, but grounds them in some science, in some studies. That's great because that... Yeah, I mean, it literally, it just grounds it, doesn't it? Puts your feet on the ground with it, just firmly beds it into real life and appeals to those of us who like to use logic to try and figure things out and opens it up as just another thing to try. And that's what we talk about, isn't it? We talk about all these different things and hopefully one of them, some of them resonate with you and they might be something you want to give a go.
Well, I appreciate this episode, Daisy, because like I said, it's a reinforcement to me and a reminder that there are practical ways to gain some of the benefits that you talked about and that vision boards can be really useful, or I'm going to start calling them action boards, can be really useful to move us beyond just having a dream and creating a reality.
Definitely. And I have just done a quick search of my Audible library, and yes, there it is. So I will, at some point, give it a listen. Doesn't look like it's too long. I'm not sure if it's not telling me whether I listened to it or not. So I'm not sure whether I did. I know it's been in there for a while. So I shall go off and I shall listen to the whole book and I will let you know what else she has to say.
Well, the fact that I don't see an action board hanging behind you in this video
Haven't started
call,
yet.
I'm guessing maybe you have not listened yet.
Might be next to my bed.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Maybe it's there.
Part of the problem these days, actually, for making something real like that, I would actually be more drawn to making something virtual, just because the practicalities, these days of making a real life collage. Yeah, you'd have to go out and buy the magazines that might have the images you want in them, or you'd have to look on the internet and print them out. I don't have a working printer anymore. You know, we're so much more, or I am so much trying to move away from, I still do make notes on paper, but, you know, trying to move away from that and be more virtual about a lot of the things I do. So actually, practically, it's a bit difficult to do, but could start with a visual one.
Ooh, but Daisy, you are also very creative. And so instead of looking for pictures in a magazine or whatever, you could draw imagery that
That's true.
you want to use.
Yeah, maybe I will do that.
Very good.
Okay, well, until I see you again, I hope you and everyone else at home has a very wonderful week.
Take good care, everyone.